What if a single moment, a decision to help someone in need, could change your life in ways you never imagined? That's exactly what happened to Evan, a struggling single dad just trying to make it through another day. When he stopped to help a woman stranded on the side of the road, he had no idea how that simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would turn his world upside down. We all love hearing about acts of compassion, don't we? But this story is different. What started as a routine gesture became something so much bigger, something that will make you question how far one good deed can really go. You might think you know where this is heading, but trust me, the twists in this emotional story will leave you speechless. So, why did Evan's choice to stop and lend a hand matter so much? And how did this encounter transform not just one life, but two? Stick around. You're about to hear a story that will inspire, surprise, and maybe even make you believe in the power of small moments to spark something extraordinary. Evan was no stranger to struggle. His days began with the hum of an old alarm clock and the aroma of weak coffee, a ritual that reminded him of his limited means. As a single dad, every penny he earned went towards Emma, his 8-year-old daughter who had a laugh as infectious as sunshine. Though Evan's life was a constant hustle, his compassion never waned. It was his heart, not his wallet, that made him wealthy in ways he couldn't yet see. That morning, as Evan rushed to drop Emma at school before heading to his third job of the week, fate had other plans. A car was pulled over on the shoulder, its hood gleaming under the early sun. A well-dressed woman stood nearby, pacing anxiously with her phone to her ear. Evan's first thought was to keep driving. Time wasn't on his side. But something about her expression, a mix of frustration and helplessness, pulled at his sense of empathy. Slowing down, Evan parked his old sedan a few feet ahead and told Emma to stay put. "Dad's just being a superhero for a minute," he said with a wink, trying to mask the urgency in his tone. Emma giggled, fully trusting her father's ability to fix anything, from toys to tires. As Evan approached the woman, he noticed her polished appearance, tailored coat, designer boots, and an air of someone who wasn't accustomed to roadside inconveniences. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice warm despite the chill in the air. The woman, startled, turned to him with a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Yes, please. I've been trying to call for help, but no one's available," she explained, her voice tinged with desperation. Evan smiled and introduced himself. "Well, Claire, today's your lucky day. Let's see what we've got here." As Evan worked on the flat tire, his hands steady despite the freezing metal, Claire observed him with curiosity. It wasn't just his skill that impressed her. It was the calm focus and quiet resilience he exuded. She couldn't help but notice the contrast between his worn-out jacket and the effortless confidence he carried. "Do you do this often?" she asked, half joking. "Only when superheroes are needed," he replied with a grin, making her chuckle for the first time that morning. Emma peeked out of the car window, watching her dad with admiration. "You've got quite the cheerleader," Claire remarked, gesturing toward Emma. Evan nodded. "She's my reason for everything." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken realities. Claire could tell Evan wasn't a man with endless resources, yet here he was, giving his time freely to a stranger in need. It was an act of pure compassion. As the tire finally came loose, Evan wiped his hands on a rag and looked up at Claire. "All set. You're good to go," he said, his tone casual, as if this was just another routine task. But for Claire, it wasn't. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Evan shrugged. "Just paying it forward," he replied, though the truth was, he didn't expect anything in return. Evan didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness was about to alter his life in ways he couldn't fathom. As Claire hurriedly got back into her car, her destination, something she hadn't yet mentioned, would soon intertwine their paths in a story filled with inspiration and unexpected twists. What awaited at the end of her journey? The moment Evan finished tightening the last bolt on Claire's tire, she checked her watch and let out a panicked gasp. "I'm cutting it so close," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Evan tilted his head, curiosity piqued. "What's the rush?" he asked. Claire hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "I was on my way to place a lottery bet. Today's jackpot is $100 million. and I've been planning this all week. The cutoff is in 10 minutes. Her words hung in the air, almost absurd against the backdrop of her otherwise polished demeanor. Without a second thought, Evan gestured toward her car. Go. You don't have time to waste. His calm determination lit a spark in Claire, who nodded and hurried into the driver's seat. But as she turned the key, the engine sputtered ominously. Oh no, she groaned, panic flooding her voice. Evan didn't skip a beat. Pop the hood, he said firmly, rolling up his sleeves. Time was slipping through their fingers, but his focus never wavered. Claire watched in awe as Evan worked with a mix of urgency and skill, coaxing her car back to life. Try it now, he called out after a tense few minutes. The engine roared, and relief washed over her face. You're a lifesaver, she exclaimed, a glimmer of hope returning. Evan stepped back, waving her off with a grin. Go win that jackpot, he said, half joking but fully sincere. There was something inspiring about his unwavering support, even for a stranger's fleeting chance at fortune. With her heart pounding, Claire sped off toward the lottery office, the clock ticking louder with each passing second. Evan and Emma watched her disappear down the road, Emma wide-eyed with curiosity. Do you think she'll make it? She asked. Evan shrugged, his tone light but thoughtful. If it's meant to be, it'll happen. Sometimes you just have to take a chance and hope for the best. Meanwhile, Claire navigated through traffic, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Every red light felt like a cruel joke, every second a reminder of how close she was to missing her shot. Her thoughts raced alongside her car. What if she didn't make it? What if all this effort had been for nothing? But deep down, she clung to the inspiration of Evan's selfless act. His compassion had been a reminder that sometimes, even against the odds, good things could still happen. She arrived at the lottery office with moments to spare, parking haphazardly and sprinting inside. The clerk raised an eyebrow at her breathless urgency, but didn't comment as she handed over her ticket and placed her bet. As she exited the building, the weight of her mourning began to sink in. She had made it. Against all odds, she had made it. And as the realization washed over her, so did a sense of gratitude, not just for the timing, but for the stranger who had made it possible. Back in his car, Evan turned the key and prepared to head off to work. Emma sat quietly in the back seat, a rare contemplative expression on her face. Why did you help her, Dad? She asked, her voice small but curious. Evan smiled, meeting her gaze in the rearview mirror. Because sometimes people just need a little help to make their dreams happen, he replied. Little did he know how prophetic those words would soon prove to be. The evening news crackled on in Evan's tiny apartment, its dull glow casting a warm light over the cluttered living room. He barely paid attention, focusing instead on Emma's art project spread across their old coffee table. Suddenly, a headline caught his ear. Local woman wins $100 million jackpot. His eyes darted to the screen, and there she was, Claire, the woman whose car he'd fixed just hours earlier. Her smile was radiant, but what struck him most was the unmistakable glint of disbelief in her eyes. Evan sat back, stunned. Well, I'll be, he muttered under his breath. Meanwhile, in a much grander living room, Claire was still reeling from the win. The check sat on her dining table, a surreal reminder of how her life had just changed in an instant. But as the initial euphoria began to fade, her thoughts turned to Evan. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have made it in time. His act of kindness, so simple yet so profound, had been the catalyst for everything. And now, she felt an undeniable urge to repay him, not out of obligation, but from a deep well of gratitude and empathy. The next morning, Evan was busy fixing a leaky faucet at his part-time job when his phone buzzed. He hesitated, wiping his hands before answering. Hello? Claire's voice came through, bright yet nervous. Hi, Evan. It's Claire. Do you have a moment? He straightened up, surprised but intrigued. Sure, what's up? She took a deep breath before explaining. I won the lottery. And I need to see you. Can we meet? When Claire arrived at the cafe where they'd agreed to meet, she was dressed casually, a stark contrast to the polished image Evan remembered. She greeted him warmly, and they sat down, the air between them filled with an unspoken sense of awe. "I wouldn't have made it without you," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "You didn't just fix my car. You gave me a chance I thought I'd lost. And now, I want to give something back." From her bag, she pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Evan opened it hesitantly, his breath catching as he saw the figure. $10 million. He blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. "Claire, this is too much," he stammered. But she shook her head, her expression firm yet kind. "It's not about the money, Evan. It's about what you did for me. You believed in helping someone, no strings attached. Let me do the same." The exchange was both surreal and humbling. For Evan, it wasn't just the money. It was the recognition of his humanity, his compassion, and his quiet resilience. Claire wasn't just thanking him with a check. She was honoring the values that had guided his life, even in its hardest moments. For a man who had spent years scraping by, the gesture was life-changing in every sense of the word. As they parted ways, Claire smiled and said, "This isn't goodbye, you know? I have a feeling our paths are far from done crossing." Evan laughed, his voice light for the first time in years. "You might be right about that." And as he walked away, the envelope safely tucked into his pocket, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a much deeper connection, one that would shape both their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The first few weeks after their cafe meeting passed in a blur for Evan. He used part of the money to pay off overdue bills, repair his car, and buy Emma new school supplies. But despite the whirlwind of changes, one thing lingered in his mind. Claire. She had called to check in a few times, asking how he and Emma were adjusting, but their conversations always ended too soon. He found himself looking forward to those moments, though he couldn't quite explain why. Claire, too, found herself thinking about Evan more often than she expected. She admired his humility and the quiet strength he carried, traits so rare in her fast-paced world. One evening, she called him on a whim. "I was wondering," she began, her tone playful, "if you and Emma might want to join me for dinner this weekend. Nothing fancy, just a chance to catch up." Evan hesitated but quickly agreed, surprised at how easily she had bridged the gap between their worlds. That Saturday, Claire invited them to her home, a spacious yet cozy place that immediately captured Emma's imagination. "This is like a castle," Emma exclaimed, twirling in the living room. Claire laughed, kneeling to Emma's level. "Well, every castle needs a princess," she said warmly. Evan watched the exchange with a mix of amusement and something deeper, a realization that Claire's kindness extended far beyond her generosity. Over the course of the evening, laughter filled the air. Claire shared stories from her career, while Evan recounted Emma's latest school adventures. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, weaving threads of empathy and understanding between them. For the first time, Evan felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was connecting, truly connecting, with someone who saw him for who he was. And Claire found herself inspired by Evan's resilience and the unwavering love he had for his daughter. As their dinners became a regular occurrence, the bond between them deepened. Emma adored Claire, often begging her dad to visit more often, and Evan, though hesitant at first, began to let his guard down. He found himself sharing pieces of his past, his struggles, his dreams, and the quiet hope that had always kept him moving forward. Claire listened with genuine interest, her empathy shining through every word of encouragement she offered. One evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on Claire's couch, Evan stayed a little longer. They sat on the patio, the night sky blanketing them in a quiet serenity. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," Claire admitted, her voice soft but steady. "Someone who reminds me of what really matters." Evan smiled, his eyes reflecting the gratitude he couldn't put into words. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible," he said. "Not just the money, but this. All of this." Their connection grew not through grand gestures but in the little moments, shared laughs, meaningful glances, and the comfort of simply being together. It was a romance story that neither of them had expected, one built on a foundation of compassion and mutual respect. And though neither said it out loud, they both knew this was something extraordinary. As the months passed, Their lives began to intertwine in ways neither could have imagined. But even amidst the joy, a question lingered in both their minds. Could this be the beginning of something even greater? The day Evan proposed was unassuming but perfect in its simplicity. They were at the park, watching Emma play on the swings, her laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. Claire sat beside Evan on a weathered bench, her hand resting lightly on his. "You know," he began, his tone uncharacteristically shy, "I've been thinking about how much has changed since that day on the side of the road." Claire turned to him, her eyes soft with curiosity. "It feels like I found more than just a partner. I found a family." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, unadorned ring. "Claire, I'm not great with big speeches, but I know one thing. I don't want to imagine the rest of my life without you in it. Will you marry me?" Her laughter bubbled up, a mix of joy and disbelief. "Of course, Evan," she said, tears glistening as she kissed him. Emma ran over moments later, squealing with excitement when she realized what had just happened. Their wedding was a small affair, held in the same park where Evan had proposed. Friends and family gathered to celebrate the couple who had found love in the most unexpected way. As they exchanged vows, Claire spoke about the moment she had won the lottery. Not the money, but the man who had shown her the true meaning of compassion. Evan, in turn, promised to always honor the bond that had grown between them, a bond rooted in kindness and hope. Married life brought its share of challenges, but they faced them together. Evan flourished in his new role as a partner in Claire's business, managing properties with a meticulous care that tenants came to adore. Claire continued to expand her ventures, but she always made time for family. Their home became a place of warmth and laughter, filled with Emma's art projects and the quiet hum of a life well lived. Evan often marveled at how far he'd come from the days of scraping by, though he never let himself forget those struggles. They were a reminder of how one small act of kindness could ripple outward, transforming not just his life but those around him. And Claire, for all her success, found a new sense of fulfillment in the love and stability they had built together. She often said that meeting Evan and Emma was the real prize, far greater than any jackpot. As the years passed, their family grew, not just in numbers but in the depth of their bond. They celebrated milestones big and small, from Emma's first art exhibit to their modest anniversary trips. Every moment felt like a victory, a testament to the power of empathy and inspiration that had brought them together. Their story became one they often shared with friends, a reminder that love doesn't always follow a predictable path. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Emma looked up with a question. "Do you think all this happened because Dad helped you with your car?" Claire smiled, glancing at Evan. "I think it happened because your dad saw someone who needed help and didn't think twice. That's what started everything." Emma nodded thoughtfully, her young mind grasping the enormity of the simple truth. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was full of love, laughter, and the quiet moments that make a house a home. Evan and Claire often reflected on how a chance meeting on a chilly morning had led to a story neither of them could have written alone. And though their journey had been shaped by unexpected twists, one thing was certain. They had found in each other the family they had always dreamed of. As the years unfolded, Evan and Claire remained a testament to the idea that compassion and hope could turn even the smallest gesture into something extraordinary. Their story didn't just end. It continued to grow, inspiring everyone who heard it to believe in the power of kindness.